It takes 5 seconds for a man to reveal his true nature. That was how long my boss took to slide a paper across the desk, slashing my salary by 50%. He thought financial suffocation would make me beg. He forgot that a cornered woman does not cry. She uses his corrupt system as a perfect noose. This is how I took back 100% of my life, plus his coveted director chair. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Boss Revenge Stories, a channel I must sadly announce will stop uploading new videos in the near future because YouTube has completely demonetized us, leaving us with no budget to operate. We are moving our operations entirely to Patreon. So if you enjoy today's story, please support us by joining our Patreon to listen to exclusive, much longer, and incredibly detailed true stories featuring multiple emotional voice actors that we simply cannot make public on YouTube. You can easily join us by scanning the QR code currently on your screen or by clicking the Patreon link located in the video description and pinned comment. Now, let us dive right into today's story, told through the eyes of a 38-year-old woman named Reese Edwards. The air conditioning unit inside the 14th floor glass conference room of Omnistrat Innovations always hummed with a low, oppressive frequency. It was the kind of sterile, hermetically sealed corporate space in Austin, Texas, where the oxygen always felt just a little too thin. I sat perfectly still in the ergonomic chair, acutely aware of every microscopic sound echoing in the suffocating silence. Across the polished mahogany table sat Marcus, my direct supervisor. To his right sat Elaine, our director of human resources. I was the lead security auditor. At 38 years old, my job was to find anomalies, track irregularities, and enforce protocols. I was trained to remain unblinking in the face of crisis. Neither Marcus nor Elaine seemed to understand that fundamental fact about me. There had been no preliminary small talk, no offering of coffee, no polite inquiry about my weekend. The sudden calendar invite had simply materialized on my screen 15 minutes prior, cryptically titled Alignment Discussion. Marcus leaned forward. The leather of his chair groaned under his weight. With a heavy, deliberate movement, he extended his index and middle fingers, pushing a single sheet of printed paper across the cold surface of the table until it rested exactly 1 inch from my intertwined hands. I did not reach for it immediately. I let my eyes drop to the bold text at the top of the page. It was a formal compensation amendment. "We are making some structural changes," Marcus began, his voice dripping with rehearsed corporate empathy. "We have evaluated your recent contributions and your overall synergy with the team. Unfortunately, upper management has determined that your current attitude is inconsistent with our new cultural direction. Effective immediately, your compensation is being reduced by 50%. 50%. Half of my livelihood, half of my mortgage payments, my groceries, my survival." He delivered the blow expecting an explosion. He expected tears, or perhaps a trembling voice begging for a second chance. He wanted to watch me fracture under the immense weight of sudden financial ruin. Instead, I simply breathed in. The air was frigid. I kept my hands folded neatly on the table. My pulse remained frighteningly steady. I shifted my gaze from Marcus to Elaine. The HR director was suddenly deeply fascinated by her leather-bound notebook. Her expensive ballpoint pen scratched rhythmically against the pristine white paper. She was writing absolutely nothing. I could see the frantic, meaningless loops of ink she was drawing just to avoid looking me in the eye. The scratching sound was deafening in the tight, glass-walled room. "Is this a disciplinary action or a performance review?" I asked. My voice was perfectly flat, devoid of a single ounce of the panic they were so desperately fishing for. Marcus blinked, clearly thrown off balance by my icy composure. He glanced sideways at Elaine, silently pleading for his human resources shield to intervene. Elaine stopped her frantic scribbling. She cleared her throat, her neck flushing a splotchy crimson. "Oh no, Reese, no. It is not a disciplinary action, and it is not a formal performance review, either. It is just a necessary adjustment based on departmental realignments." "A necessary adjustment," I repeated, letting the absurd phrase hang in the cold air. I finally reached out and tapped the edge of the paper with one fingernail. I did not pick up the pen resting beside it. "I will not be signing this," I stated, leaning back into my chair and locking eyes with Marcus. The smug confidence that had radiated from him just 2 minutes prior was rapidly evaporating. "Furthermore, I have a very simple request. Show me the company policy that allows you to cut my salary by 50% without a prior written warning, an improvement plan, or any documented disciplinary history." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of heavy, dead quiet that only occurs when predators realize they have stepped blindly into a steel trap. The only sound left in the room was the harsh, ragged sound of Marcus trying to catch his breath. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. He adjusted his silk tie, his breathing suddenly shallow and erratic. "Listen, Reese, we are just trying to do what is best for the division. You need to understand the bigger picture here." "The policy, Marcus," I interrupted, my tone dropping to a sharp whisper. "I want the specific handbook section that legally authorizes this ambush." Elaine frantically flipped a page in her notebook, desperate to break the tension. "I will have to check on that. Reese, I will get back to you with the exact documentation."
Kick on.
"Take your time, Elaine," I replied. I stood up slowly, smoothing the non-existent wrinkles from my skirt. I left the piece of paper sitting exactly where Marcus had pushed it. As I walked toward the heavy glass door, I did not look back. I did not need to. I knew their eyes were burning into my spine. They thought they had backed a desperate employee into a corner. They had no idea they had just declared war on a woman who knew exactly how to dismantle their entire empire. 3 weeks prior to that suffocating meeting in the glass room, the real reason for my sudden corporate execution had been set into motion. They called it a cultural misalignment, but the truth was an entirely different beast. The reality was about a massive, looming federal government contract. Omnistrat Innovations was on the verge of closing a cybersecurity deal so vast it would secure the company revenues for the next decade. If the deal closed on time, Marcus was slated to receive a commission bonus so large it would easily pay off a luxury yacht in cash. The stakes were astronomical, and in corporate America, astronomical stakes breed desperate measures. As the lead security auditor, my signature was the final hurdle. I was the gatekeeper. I was the one who had to stamp the core software as impenetrable before the government signed the final check. The problem was, the software was not impenetrable. It was bleeding from a massive arterial wound. During a routine late-night penetration test, I found a catastrophic vulnerability buried deep within the core architecture. It was a backdoor so glaring that any semi-competent hostile actor could stroll right into the federal database and harvest whatever they pleased. We were dealing with sensitive infrastructure data. I compiled the evidence, drafted a severe risk assessment, and flagged it for immediate remediation. Fixing it would take several months. It would delay the government rollout. Most importantly to my boss, it would freeze his precious commission bonus indefinitely. The very next morning, Marcus summoned me to his private office. There was no HR shield that day. It was just him, his monumental ego, and a freshly printed copy of my risk assessment resting on his heavy mahogany desk. "Reese, sit down," he commanded, not bothering to look up from his dual monitors. I took the seat across from him, my tablet resting on my lap. I expected an urgent strategy session on how to deploy an emergency patch and manage the client expectations. I did not expect what came next. Marcus picked up my 50-page report, walked over to the heavy-duty shredder sitting next to his desk, and dropped the entire document into the slot. The loud grinding noise chewed through the paper, violently destroying the physical evidence in a matter of seconds. "We are not doing this," Marcus said, walking back and leaning heavily against the edge of his desk, crossing his arms. "The federal audit is next week. The disbursement schedule is locked in stone. We cannot afford a red flag on the core software right now. Do you have any idea how many millions of dollars are riding on this specific quarter?" I stared at the shredder, then back at his face. "That is not a red flag, Marcus. That is a gaping hole in a national security framework. If we ship this product to a federal agency in its current state, we are literally handing over the keys to highly classified data." "It is a minor technical glitch," he dismissed. waving his hand as if swatting away an annoying insect. The development team will push a silent patch in the third quarter, update after the funds clear. Right now, I need you to go back to your desk. Completely delete this assessment from your local drive, and sign the safety clearance form. My blood ran cold. The ethical line had not just been crossed, it had been completely obliterated. You are asking me to forge a security clearance for a government contract, I said, keeping my voice dangerously level so he would not mistake my shock for weakness. Do you understand the legal implications of that? Falsifying compliance on federal software is a direct violation of the False Claims Act. That is federal fraud. It carries severe prison time and catastrophic fines. Marcus leaned forward, the friendly, corporate leader facade melting away into something ugly, desperate, and deeply threatening. His eyes narrowed into dark, calculating slits. "Let me be very clear with you," he whispered, his voice dropping a full octave. "I built this division from the ground up. I brought this deal to the table. We are talking about tens of millions of dollars in guaranteed revenue. At your level in this company, you need to start understanding what is actually good for the team. Being a team player means knowing when to look the other way so everyone can win. If you do not sign that paper, you are declaring yourself an enemy of progress, and I do not keep enemies on my payroll." How was giving me a choice. I could be complicit in a federal crime and keep my comfortable salary, or I could stand my ground and be destroyed. "I cannot sign a fraudulent document," I said simply. I stood up, refusing to break eye contact, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing fear. "I will be uploading the digital copy of the risk assessment to the central server for the engineering team to review. How you handle the contract timeline is your problem, not mine." I walked out of his office, marched straight to my desk, and uploaded the encrypted file to the company-wide internal database. I hit submit and watched the progress bar hit 100%. But 30 minutes later, when I logged in with my secondary credentials to verify the upload, the file was completely gone. The system log showed absolutely no record of the transfer. Marcus had administrative override privileges. He had caught the file in the server firewall and quietly erased it from existence. At that exact moment, sitting under the harsh fluorescent lights of my cubicle, I realized the terrifying truth. I had just drawn a line in the sand against a man who controlled the entire digital ecosystem of our workplace. By refusing to bend to his corruption, I had painted a giant target on my own back. I was no longer just an employee to him. I was a massive liability, and in corporate America, liabilities are systematically starved, isolated, and exterminated. The countdown to my professional execution had officially begun. The days following that fateful refusal felt like moving through thick mud. The punishment was not explosive. It was a silent, creeping frost designed to freeze me out of my own career. It started with the digital infrastructure. I would log into my workstation to review the quarterly security patches for our secondary clients, only to be met with a sterile, gray pop-up box stating my administrative credentials had been revoked. When I reached out to the Information Technology Department, they vaguely cited a system migration. Then came the calendar purge. Weekly strategy meetings that I had personally chaired for 3 years suddenly vanished from my schedule. I would walk past the glass conference rooms and see my junior analysts sitting in chairs that belonged to me, presenting data I had compiled, while Marcus sat at the head of the table, deliberately avoiding my gaze through the glass. I was being erased. That is the most insidious form of corporate warfare. They do not fire you right away. They turn you into a ghost. Then came the Whisper campaign. Marcus was a master of psychological manipulation. He never openly criticized my work. Instead, he planted seeds of doubt with every department head. I noticed the shift in the break room. Colleagues who used to stop and chat about weekend plans suddenly averted their eyes and scurried away when I approached the coffee machine. A friend from the marketing department finally pulled me aside one afternoon and quietly warned me. Marcus had been holding closed-door meetings, expressing deep, manufactured concern about my mental health. He told them I was experiencing a severe psychological breakdown, that I had become erratic, uncooperative, and aggressively negative. He framed my exclusion from projects as a compassionate act to reduce my stress levels. He was actively destroying my professional reputation, painting me as a fragile, unstable woman so that when the time came to terminate me, everyone would simply nod in sympathetic agreement. But the psychological warfare was nothing compared to the crushing reality of the 50% salary reduction. The financial squeeze was a physical weight sitting squarely on my chest. Living in Austin, Texas, was brutally expensive. My carefully balanced budget was instantly annihilated. When the first altered paycheck hit my bank account, a cold sweat broke out across my body. It was not enough to cover the monthly mortgage on my house, the property taxes, the exorbitant health insurance premiums. The basic cost of utilities and groceries suddenly became insurmountable mountains. I spent my nights staring at the ceiling fan in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs, calculating exactly how many weeks I had until the bank foreclosed on the home I had spent my entire adult life working for. The financial terror was paralyzing. It was exactly what Marcus wanted. He wanted me to panic, to become so desperate that I would either beg for my full salary back by signing his fraudulent documents or simply break down and resign. I refused to give him either satisfaction. I turned my attention to human resources. I drafted a meticulously polite email to Elaine, officially requesting the employee handbook section and the specific corporate bylaws that permitted a unilateral 50% wage reduction without a single verbal or written warning. Her responses were a masterclass in bureaucratic gaslighting. Elaine replied with agonizing slowness, often waiting a full 48 hours to acknowledge my message. When she did reply, her emails were heavily padded with corporate jargon meant to exhaust me. Hi, Reese. I'm currently circling back with the legal compliance team to ensure we provide the most robust documentation regarding your departmental realignment, she wrote. We are still waiting on directives from upper management. I will touch base with you next week. She was stonewalling. She was playing the role of the overwhelmed, incompetent human resources representative perfectly, buying Marcus the time he needed to finalize the government contract while my bank account bled dry. I might have believed her act if I had not stayed late on a Tuesday evening to finish some menial data entry tasks they had dumped on my desk. The office was empty. I walked over to the communal printer on the executive floor to grab my hard copies. Sitting in the output tray, left behind by someone rushing out the door, was a high-resolution scan of a restaurant receipt. I picked it up. It was from an obscenely expensive downtown steakhouse. Dated 3 nights ago, the total bill was over $800, featuring 2 bottles of imported wine and 2 premium steaks. But it was not the extravagant meal that made my blood freeze. It was the handwritten note scribbled in blue ink across the bottom of the receipt, right next to Marcus's signature. The handwriting was undeniably his. To Elaine, a little advance celebration. Once the Edwards problem is managed and the federal funds clear, your offshore consulting fee is locked in. Cheers to the new tax bracket. I stood frozen under the humming fluorescent lights of the copy room. The pieces of the puzzle violently snapped together. Elaine was not an incompetent, slow-moving human resources director. She was his accomplice. They were having a shady relationship, and Marcus had promised her a lucrative, under-the-table cut of his massive government bonus. My termination was the final requirement for them to get their payout. Human resources was not going to protect me. The entire department was corrupted by the very man trying to destroy me. I folded the receipt with surgical precision and slipped it into the inner pocket of my blazer. The claustrophobic panic that had been suffocating me for weeks suddenly vanished, replaced by a cold, hyper-focused clarity. If there was no system left to protect me, I would have to use their own greed against them. They thought I was a ghost slowly fading away in the dark. They had no idea I was quietly building a guillotine. To survive the corporate slaughterhouse, you must become a machine. Over the next 2 weeks, I did not throw a tantrum. I did not storm into human resources to demand justice, and I certainly did not hand them my resignation. I arrived at the office at exactly 8 in the morning, Monday through Friday, and I did not leave until precisely 5 in the evening. They assigned me mind-numbing, entry-level data sorting tasks meant for a first-year intern. I completed every single spreadsheet with 100% accuracy, ahead of schedule, and delivered them with a polite, vacant smile. I gave them absolutely nothing. In employment law, a company looking to terminate an employee without severance needs to establish just cause. They need a documented history of insubordination, chronic lateness, or poor performance to legally justify the firing. I was a ghost in that office, yes, but I was a flawless, untouchable ghost. I was denying Marcus the legal ammunition he desperately needed to finalize my execution. While I played the perfect, compliant worker bee during the day, my evenings were spent constructing a meticulously detailed legal snare. I sat at my kitchen table, nursing a cold cup of coffee, drafting an email that was completely devoid of emotion. It was a masterpiece of corporate weaponization, built entirely out of cold, hard facts. I addressed it directly to Elaine in Human Resources, officially reiterating my request for the exact policy justifying my 50% salary reduction. But this time, I bypassed the local hierarchy entirely. In the carbon copy field, I typed in the email address of Julianne. Julianne was the Director of Operations for the South American region, a formidable executive who operated out of the global headquarters in New York. While her specific title covered the Southern Hemisphere, her operational authority on compliance matters extended across all regional offices, meaning she was the highest-ranking superior directly above Marcus. She was known throughout the company for being ruthlessly efficient and having absolute zero tolerance for legal liabilities. The body of my email was a razor-sharp timeline. I did not make any wild accusations of fraud or extortion. I simply laid out the chronological sequence of events. I noted that on the 14th of the month, at 3 in the afternoon, I officially flagged a critical security vulnerability in the upcoming federal project. I attached the metadata timestamp showing exactly when I uploaded the risk assessment to the internal server. I then noted that on the 15th of the month, less than 24 hours later, my administrative access was suddenly revoked, and I was subsequently pulled into a meeting where my salary was instantly slashed in half. I concluded the email by politely asking if this rapid retaliatory sequence of events was standard operating procedure for the Austin branch. I hit send at exactly 6 in the morning, ensuring it would be at the very top of their inboxes when they logged on. The reaction was instantaneous and explosive. At 9:15 in the morning, my desk phone rang. It was not Human Resources scheduling a formal review. It was Marcus, and his voice was remarkably tight, entirely stripped of its previous arrogant swagger. He asked me to step into his office immediately. Before I stood up from my desk, I reached into my blazer pocket and pressed the physical record button on a small, high-definition audio recording device. Here is a beautiful fact about the state of Texas. It operates under a one-party consent law for audio recordings. As long as one person involved in the conversation is aware that the recording is taking place, it is completely legal and entirely admissible in a court of law. I was about to capture a masterpiece. When I entered his office, the heavy mahogany door clicked shut behind me. Marcus looked terrible. The smug confidence that usually radiated from him was entirely gone, replaced by the frantic, sweat-drenched energy of a cornered animal. The window blinds were drawn shut. He did not sit behind his massive desk. Instead, he hovered near a small side table, gesturing for me to take a seat with a forced, painfully unnatural smile. "Reese, thank you for coming in so quickly," he began, his voice dripping with a sickening, manufactured warmth. "I want to talk about the email you sent this morning. I think there has been a massive misunderstanding between us. We are on the same team, and I really feel like things have gotten unnecessarily contentious." I sat in complete silence, my hands folded neatly in my lap, letting the hidden device silently capture every desperate syllable. "I have been reviewing the departmental budget," Marcus continued, leaning forward and clasping his hands together in a gesture of fake solidarity. "And I think we can find a way to reinstate your original salary, 100% of it, effective on the very next pay cycle. I will even talk to Human Resources about wiping that whole cultural misalignment thing from your permanent record. We can wipe the slate clean. We can go back to exactly how things were." All I need you to do is send a brief follow-up email to Julianne stating that your previous message was sent in error due to a miscommunication, and then, of course, just sign off on the federal security clearance form by noon today. It was a bribe. Plain, simple, and beautifully documented. He was explicitly linking the restoration of my stolen salary to my willingness to participate in a federal cover-up. He was handing me the final nail for his own coffin. You want me to retract my formal request for a human resources policy and sign a fraudulent government document in exchange for the salary you illegally took from me, I stated clearly, ensuring every single word was perfectly enunciated for the microphone. Is that exactly what you are offering, Marcus? He flinched, visibly uncomfortable with my blunt phrasing. Come on, Reese. Do not use words like illegal or fraudulent. We are just negotiating a mutually beneficial compromise. It is a truce. Just take the deal. I stood up slowly, looking down at the man who had spent the last month trying to destroy my life. I decline your offer, I said, my voice as cold as absolute zero. I do not negotiate with extortionists. I turned and walked out of his office without waiting for a response, leaving him sputtering in shock. I knew exactly what was about to happen next. My email had already detonated within the upper corporate hierarchy by connecting a federal security risk directly to a retaliatory salary cut. I had triggered an automatic, mandatory compliance investigation. 30 minutes later, whispers swept across the office floor like wildfire. Julianne had cleared her entire schedule. She was currently boarding a direct flight from New York down to Austin to handle the crisis personally. The trap had been perfectly set, and Marcus was standing right in the center of it, staring up at the heavy blade, waiting for it to fall. The atmosphere in the executive boardroom on the top floor was vastly different from the claustrophobic glass box where my execution had initially been ordered. This space was cavernous, lined with rich oak paneling and dominated by a massive marble table. Sitting at the head of that table was Julianne, flanked by two sharp-suited attorneys from the corporate legal compliance division. She possessed the cold, calculating energy of a woman who fired executives before she finished her morning coffee. Across from me sat Marcus and Elaine. Marcus had managed to recover a fraction of his arrogant swagger, undoubtedly convinced he could charm his way out of this escalation. Elaine, however, looked physically ill, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a thick manila folder. Julianne called the meeting to order with a sharp tap of her pen. "Let us get straight to the point," she demanded, her gaze sweeping across the room like a searchlight. "I flew down here because an email flagged a potential compliance violation regarding a sudden 50% compensation reduction. Marcus, the floor is yours. Explain to me why one of our senior auditors is claiming retaliatory financial discipline." Marcus leaned forward, adopting an expression of deep, paternal concern. It was a masterclass in corporate acting. "Julianne, first of all, thank you for coming down. I want to clarify that this was never about retaliation. Over the past 90 days, we have observed a steep and alarming decline in her work performance. She became incredibly disruptive, outright refusing to collaborate with the engineering department. The salary adjustment was a temporary, albeit harsh, disciplinary measure intended to wake her up and correct her trajectory before we had to consider termination. Elaine immediately seized her cue. She opened her manila folder and slid a stack of printed papers across the marble table toward Julianne and the lawyers. To corroborate Marcus's statement, "I have compiled a series of internal emails," Elaine said, her voice shaking only slightly. "These documents show her blatantly disregarding project deadlines and sending hostile messages to her peers. We were trying to manage a deeply troubled employee, Julianne." I glanced at the papers. They were clumsy, blatant forgeries. Marcus had likely spent the last 24 hours fabricating email headers to make me look like a deranged, aggressive loose cannon. Julianne picked up the top sheet, scanned it briefly, and sighed. The tension in her shoulders visibly relaxed. She was a busy executive who abhorred messy legal battles. A simple case of a disgruntled, underperforming employee lashing out was music to her ears. It meant the company was safe. "I see," Julianne said, folding her hands over the documents. She turned her icy gaze toward me. It appears your department leadership had documented reasons for their actions. Even if the method of reducing your salary by 50% bypassed standard human resources protocol. We are going to treat this as a severe miscommunication. Marcus, you will restore her original salary immediately. Elaine, you will issue a formal written warning instead. And you, she pointed her pen directly at me, will sign the federal security clearance form by the end of the business day so we can finalize this government contract. If you cannot do that, we will accept your immediate resignation. Are we entirely clear? Julianne moved to close her leather portfolio, ready to catch her return flight to New York. She thought she had neatly swept the dirt under the rug. She was wrong. We are not clear at all. Julianne, I said. My voice echoed loudly in the cavernous room, completely devoid of fear. I reached into my blazer pocket and retrieved the small, high-definition audio recorder. I placed it gently in the center of the marble table. Before you conclude this mediation based on fabricated emails, I insist you listen to a brief conversation that took place in Marcus's private office this morning. I pressed the play button. The audio quality was immaculate. Every single word of Marcus's desperate extortion rang out in the dead silence of the boardroom. The recording captured him explicitly offering to restore 100% of my salary and wipe my record clean, but only on the strict condition that I retract my complaint to Julianne and sign off on a fraudulent federal security document. The transformation in the room was violent and instantaneous. The two compliance attorneys stiffened, their eyes widening in sheer horror as the words fraudulent government document echoed from the speaker. Julianne froze, all the color instantly draining from her face. Across the table, Marcus collapsed back into his chair as if he had been shot. His jaw went completely slack, and a thick sheen of sweat erupted across his forehead. He opened his mouth to speak, to deny it, to say anything, but his vocal cords completely failed him. That recording was obtained legally under the one-party consent laws of the state of Texas, I stated clearly, picking up the device and returning it to my pocket. Marcus did not cut my pay because of poor performance. He cut my pay to starve me into submission, so I would help him cover up a massive security vulnerability in a federal project, guaranteeing his multi-million-dollar commission. Elaine abruptly pushed her chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Julianne, I swear to you, I had absolutely no idea he was doing that, she stammered, throwing Marcus under the bus without a second thought. I was just following his directives regarding her behavior. I am completely innocent in this matter. I turned my gaze to the Human Resources Director, feeling a cold, predatory smile form on my lips. Are you really, Elaine? I reached into my leather tote bag and pulled out the high-resolution scan of the steakhouse receipt, sliding it precisely across the table until it rested right in front of the two compliance attorneys. I suggest the legal team look closely at the handwritten note at the bottom of that $800 dinner bill. I instructed them. You will see Marcus explicitly promising Elaine a massive, off-the-books consulting fee out of his personal federal contract bonus, entirely contingent on my successful termination. Furthermore, if you subpoena their personal bank records, which I am sure a federal investigator will happily do, I guarantee you will find an advance payment already transferred. Human Resources was not following directives. They were accepting bribes. Elaine let out a short, high-pitched gasp and covered her mouth with both hands. The compliance attorneys were already furiously taking notes, their faces grim. They knew they were staring at a colossal company destroying liability. Julianne stood up abruptly, her chair hitting the wall behind her. The polished corporate mediator was gone, replaced by a ruthless damage control operative. Quiet, all of you, she barked. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. She looked at Marcus with absolute disgust, then turned to me. Listen to me very carefully, Julianne commanded, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Marcus and Elaine will be terminated immediately, with cause. They will be escorted out of this building by security within the next 10 minutes. You will receive all of your back pay, a massive compensation bonus, and a promotion. We will fix the software vulnerability internally before the final rollout. But this entire incident, the recording, the receipt, the vulnerability, It all stays buried within the four walls of this room. You will sign a strict non-disclosure agreement. We are containing this right now." She thought she still held the power. She thought the infinite resources of Omnistrat Innovations could simply buy my silence and bury the crime. It was truly a beautiful moment, watching a giant realize they were already dead. I did not stand up. I remained perfectly seated, my hands folded neatly on the table. "Julianne, you cannot contain this," I said softly, my voice laced with genuine pity. "You are about 24 hours too late." Julianne squinted, a look of profound confusion washing over her features. "What are you talking about?" "When I sent the email to Human Resources last week, requesting the official compensation policy, I did copy you," I explained, speaking slowly so the reality could fully sink into her brain. "But I also utilized the blind carbon copy feature. I blindly copied the entire unredacted system vulnerability report, the timeline of my retaliation, and the evidence of the pending contract fraud directly to the central inbox of the Federal Oversight Board." The entire room stopped breathing. The silence was absolute, thick, and utterly deafening. "You did what?" Julianne choked out, her voice barely a squeak. "It is no longer an internal dispute. Julianne," I continued, savoring every single syllable of their destruction. "It is a federal criminal investigation. By the time you landed in Austin this morning, government agents had already opened a formal inquiry into Omnistrat Innovations for attempted fraud under the False Claims Act. You cannot sweep this under the rug, because the rug no longer exists. The federal government owns the floor now." Marcus let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. He buried his face in his hands, his entire body shaking violently as the realization hit him. He was not just losing his job, he was going to federal prison. The knot I had spent weeks carefully tying was now pulled excruciatingly tight. There was no escape hatch. There was no golden parachute. I had systematically dismantled their corrupt system from the inside out, and now, the entire roof was caving in exactly where they stood. By 3 o'clock that very same afternoon, the atmosphere on the 14th floor had completely transformed. The suffocating tension that had gripped my lungs for weeks was suddenly replaced by a collective, stunned silence. I stood near the edge of my cubicle, watching along with 50 other employees as 3 heavily built security guards escorted Marcus and Elaine out of the executive suite. They were not allowed to touch their keyboards or access their phones. They were handed 2 flimsy cardboard boxes for their personal desk items and marched directly toward the service elevator. The invincible arrogance that had once defined Marcus was entirely gone, his face reduced to a pale mask of sheer terror. Elaine kept her head bowed, hiding her tears behind her hair. They were terminated immediately, stripped of all severance packages, and walked straight out of the building to await federal indictments for conspiracy and government contract fraud, to salvage whatever was left of the corporate reputation. Julianne was forced to execute a miraculous public relations pivot, with the Federal Oversight Board heavily scrutinizing Omnistrat Innovations. The global headquarters desperately needed a champion to prove their internal systems worked. I became that champion. In a company-wide memo sent out 2 days later, Julianne publicly commended my unwavering integrity, loudly framing my actions as a stunning display of brave whistleblowing that saved the corporation from a disastrous national security failure. The personal restitution was swift and absolute. My original salary was restored 100%, retroactive to the exact minute Marcus had ordered the reduction. When the direct deposit hit my bank account, it included every single dollar of back pay, instantly lifting the terrifying weight of my mortgage and health insurance premiums off my shoulders. On top of that, the legal department authorized a massive compensatory bonus to ensure I would not pursue any further civil litigation for workplace retaliation. But the true, undeniable victory was not the money. To appease the federal regulators and prove the company was serious about cybersecurity, Julianne promoted me directly to the position of Regional Security Audit Director. Exactly 1 week later, I moved my belongings into the large corner office. I walked behind the heavy mahogany desk and sat down in the expensive leather chair. It was the exact same chair Marcus had occupied when he confidently thought he would rule his corrupted little empire forever. It was a perfect fit. At 5 o'clock on my first official day as director, I stood up and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling glass window. I looked down at the rushing, endless stream of vehicles winding through the busy heart of Austin, Texas. The city was moving fast, completely unaware of the brutal, silent corporate war that had just concluded in the glass towers above them. For the first time in months, I took a deep breath, and the air finally felt clean. My journey through that dark tunnel taught me a vital lesson about surviving in this world. Regulations and laws are not weapons for those in power to intimidate the weak. They are the strongest shields. If you have enough courage, enough patience, and know how to swing that shield to crush those who dare to despise the truth. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with me and listening to this story until the very end. I would love to know where you are listening from today, so please let me know down in the comments. As a sincere reminder, if you found today's story empowering, please remember that our channel is forced to stop uploading new videos here in the near future. We are transitioning entirely to Patreon to survive. Please help us keep going by joining the Boss Revenge Stories Patreon channel. Over there, you will hear the most incredible, exclusive true stories that we simply cannot make public on YouTube. You can join us right now by scanning the QR code on your screen, or by using the link located in the video description or the pinned comment. Thank you again for your incredible support, and I will see you there.